In this video, we're going to take a look at the alternatives to Obsidian on iOS. So basically what that means is, what are the best Markdown apps? So let's get right to it. First of all, why would you even want to do something like that? A lot of people access their Markdown notes on their phone. In a previous video, I had covered alternatives to Obsidian for handling Markdown notes on the desktop. And I think there were like 3 or 4 pretty decent options if you use Markdown on your computer and are looking for something that's a bit simpler, a bit cleaner, less clutter than what Obsidian offers. Now, for some people, Obsidian's great because it's got everything and the kitchen sink in there. But personally, that's just not the way I use it. I prefer to have an app that's very simple, allows me to easily swap it out with another app if I want to, just really provides a clean Markdown editing app. And that's pretty much it. I don't need all the bells and whistles. And so that's what I covered in another video. This is kind of the second part. So what do you do to access the files on the go, on your phone? So for iOS, at least, I've got a couple of answers for that. And again, we're going to stay away from Obsidian for the reasons I already outlined in the previous video, but very broadly, my opinion at least, it's an app that's trying to do way too much. It's really trying to be the end-all be-all of note-taking apps, and for some people, that's perfectly fine. Personally, I like my apps to do 1, maybe 2 things really well, versus apps that try to do absolutely everything and do them all sort of okay. And so unfortunately, that's where I think Obsidian is right now, and that's why I'm looking for alternatives that really just handle Markdown very nicely and follow the principles that I think make Markdown files and folders really great as part of anybody's note-taking repertoire. One of the other reasons I'm doing this video is because most popular mobile Markdown apps actually work against this local first, available everywhere philosophy that we saw these desktop apps really follow and stick to. So just using Markdown, keeping it very simple, it's just files and folders and kind of wrapping that up in a nice interface that makes it easy to write and find and interlink the notes. When we look at the mobile apps, things are very different. So what am I actually looking for? I'm looking for the best apps for people that already believe in using Markdown and folders, that want that same experience that we saw on the desktop, just mirrored on their phone. Just a very simple app, a nice writing experience to view their notes, nicely formatted. Really simple stuff, but in a moment you're going to see it's not quite that easy. That also means I'm not looking for a best iPhone app overall. As with the desktop app, it really depends on what your needs are. So I'm going to have a couple of different options for you depending on what specifically you're looking for. And the criteria that I used this time were existing notes access. How easy is it to get access to the notes you already have on your desktop? The Markdown field, which just broadly covers how nice is the experience of viewing and editing the Markdown, and the mobile experience, which covers pretty much everything else. How easy is it to connect to the notes, to share, all the other features that are not just the writing experience, but everything else around the app. Just like last time, I had to exclude some apps, some big names for various reasons. So let me just quickly go through the list. Pretext was one I couldn't test just because it's not available in Mexico, so I can't access it in the App Store. It was highly recommended, but unfortunately had to leave it out. Logseq I also excluded because, in my opinion, it adds a lot more than just plain Markdown notes. So it's not just a Markdown editor and reader, it's kind of this whole other thing. It brings a bunch of other features. It's like a hybrid of Obsidian with a bunch of other apps. So it's kind of the same logic I used for rating the desktop apps. If you're just taking the complexity that we have now, replacing it with another different type of complexity, that's really not making things any better. And so unfortunately, even though it is highly recommended, I had to exclude it just because it adds a bunch of other new things. Again, I'm looking for something really, really simple, minimal, clean, that does just 1 or 2 things and it does them really well, not tries to pack in a whole bunch of other things, plus task management, plus graphs and calendars and things into a Markdown editor. So that's why I excluded Logseq. Runestone is another one that was highly recommended that I had to exclude because it's really more coding focused than note focused. It does support Markdown, but it also supports like 12 other programming languages. And so there's syntax highlighting and a bunch of other things. It's pretty cool, but it's not really a dedicated Markdown app. So I had to exclude it. Taio is another one. It's a pretty interesting app, but it is not the Markdown experience that we're looking for here. I saw it more as a way to very lightly edit Markdown and then immediately connect it to some other workflows like publishing or sharing or putting on social media, things like that. So it's got a lot of integrations for connecting Markdown to different workflows, not so heavy on the actual Markdown editing experience. So interesting, but had to exclude it. .md viewer, useful as a viewer, as the name implies, not really enough editing power to make the list. So if you just want to look at Markdown files, .md viewer might be a good option, but if you want to do any kind of editing, I would skip that one. Simplenote is another big name I had to exclude. It's a really nice app, but it forces its own sync model. You can't easily connect it to anything else other than what they want you to use. By the way, Simplenote is by the same people that brought you WordPress and powers probably like 80 or 90% of the blogs on the internet. So they've got a really nice app because they've got a really nice team that works on it. But unfortunately, it's just trying to get you into their ecosystem. So a really nice app, but it just does not play well with the philosophy of local first, editable everywhere. It has its own system, its own syncing, and it just wants you to use that. So for that reason, I had to exclude it. And that's it. Now we can move on to the actual list. This time I have 6 apps for you, and we're also going to start with the lowest scoring one and work our way up to my top recommendation. So the very bottom at number 6 is Drafts with a 6 out of 15. Let's take a look at the scoring. So existing notes access, it only scored a 1. And the reason for that is you can't just point it at a folder. As we saw with the desktop apps, it's really simple. It's just Markdown files in a folder, open them up with an app, and you get a nice editing and reading experience. With Drafts, you can't just do that. You can't point it at a folder. And because we're on iOS, ideally you would do this through iCloud, and that gets you syncing across all your devices. So you don't need to pay any subscription fees or anything like that. It does actually support syncing through iCloud, but you can't directly access the files. So it keeps them stored inside the app. So it's not easily user editable. You can't actually get your hands on the Markdown files. So that really cuts against the philosophy of this just being Markdown files that you can open absolutely anywhere. So technically it does support syncing, but you can't actually directly access the files. And so if you use Drafts on iOS, you have to use Drafts on the desktop. So they're really just locking you into their ecosystem, even though technically at the core of it is Markdown. So that's why it scores a 1. In terms of Markdown feel, there is no live format view, only a Markdown view. So there's not like a nicely formatted preview. You just get to see the Markdown and you get to work with the Markdown. So that's why it scores a 2 out of 5. And the mobile experience, it scored a 3 because it does have a quick format keyboard. When you tap to edit, it brings up this nice keyboard with a bunch of options to do the basic formatting things like bold and dividing lines and to-dos and headings and all that stuff. So you get a lot of options, makes that very easy. The interface though is very busy. You get 2 sidebars with menus on top of other menus. It's just like they squished down the desktop version of Drafts and then call it a day. So just a lot of buttons, a lot of things to tap, not really optimized for a mobile experience. There's a lot of options for more advanced workflows like publishing and sharing. Unfortunately for me, just the core of it, which is how nice is it to view and edit Markdown, not that great. That's why it scored a 3. And that's why overall it scored a 6 out of 15. As you can see, very busy. There's a lot of options, a lot of buttons. Let me just open up the settings here real quickly. A couple of options here. Actually, this is the settings first layer. Then there's a settings button to sign up for Drafts Pro, plus a bunch of other settings and things. And then we've got a right-hand sidebar. If we tap on that, bunch of different options for lots of different types of workflows, but very busy. Menus on top of menus. There's actions. There's all kinds of crazy things going on. And if you're looking for a very specific type of a workflow, probably you're going to find the option to do that here. But just as a very basic Markdown viewing and editing experience, it just is way, way too much for me. Here's that nice keyboard shortcuts menu right here to give us all kinds of access to different Markdown options. And here we have the left-hand sidebar that's got the inbox plus flagging plus archive plus another left-hand sidebar on top of the left-hand sidebar that's got filters and tags, and it has its own menu. So yeah, just really busy, all kinds of things going on here. And the actual Markdown editing experience is not so great. So like I said, you can't really preview it. You can just do stuff like this. Let me see if I can actually insert a heading here. And it doesn't seem like I can actually do that. So, okay, maybe it's not so nice. Anyway, the way you would do it manually, obviously, is with hashtag space, and then this is a heading, right? So we get some sort of syntax highlighting here. So it does recognize that as a heading, but then that's it, right? So you can write your Markdown here. You can open up specific files if you happen to be using their syncing. So if you write something in the desktop version of the Drafts app, you can, of course, open it up on the mobile device and you've got it here. But if you want to have easy access to dump a bunch of Markdown files in there, view what's available, export them, that becomes really complicated. And so for that reason, it scored a 6 out of 15. At number 5, we have Bear, which is one that a lot of people recommended or mentioned in the comments. It's one that I've used in the past, both on the desktop and mobile device. Unfortunately, there are some things that just cause it to score really poorly. So let's get into it. And the biggest one is existing notes access. It scores a 0. It doesn't let you point it at a folder at all. You can import things, but you can't even open existing files on your mobile device. It keeps all the files you create inside the app the same way that Drafts does. So if you use Bear on the desktop and you use Bear on the mobile device, that's great. It works really well. If you want to actually use Markdown files as a format that you can open anywhere and just very easily use across multiple applications, you're sure out of luck. Bear is very much a closed environment where if you use one of the apps, you're going to have to use the other app because there is no way to get easy access to your files in any other app. So that's why it scores a 0. And there's also 0 syncing unless you pay. With Drafts, at least we saw that it supported iCloud, and I believe you can actually do some syncing even if you don't pay. With Bear, unfortunately, there is 0 syncing unless you pay, so all the files that you create on the mobile device stay on the mobile device until you pay. There is no way to get them out unless you export them manually one by one. So just a very restrictive application. Markdown feel, however, is a 5. The live Markdown display and editing is one of the best writing experiences of any of the apps. It is number 1. There is nothing really to compare it to. The closest one would be Writer.computer, which is a desktop application. And if you remember, it lets you click into the individual lines and you can live preview the Markdown, edit it, and then move your cursor away from it, and you get the nicely formatted Markdown preview immediately. There are no multiple modes. It's just one mode, and you can very quickly see what the finished Markdown is going to look like and edit it at the same time. That's the way that Bear handles it, and it's just a really nice writing and reading experience. That's why it's such a shame that it doesn't let you access your Markdown files any other way. So a really nice Markdown writing experience, but if you're going to use Bear, you're going to have to use the entire Bear suite of apps. There's just no other way around that. Mobile experience is a 4. They've got a really nice quick format keyboard, very full-fledged, not editable, so you can't swap out the ones you use the most, but still got a lot of options. So now let me show you what that looks like. And here we have the Bear app. It's just very minimal, very simple, very nicely formatted. It supports images and all kinds of other things. I think it even supports PDFs. And so the way that you actually edit, there is no separate view. You just tap into the thing, and now you're in edit mode. And if you tap into something that has a format, you can see right here, we've got the format right here. We can quickly edit it using all these different shortcuts. We've got the shortcuts keyboard below, where we can choose a bunch of other options. We can add tables, we can add dates, insert images. And then just as you tap into each one of these lines, you can preview the Markdown and very quickly edit it or change it. And you just tap out of that, hide the keyboard, and you're back to reading mode. So there really are no separate views. It's just the one experience, and it's really nice. So on the left-hand side, you get access to all your notes. You get a nice preview if they've got images. Then here's where you actually enable the syncing. So yeah, you have to pay. There is no other way, unfortunately, to do syncing on the app. That's pretty much it. So yeah, kind of a shame because it has the best experience. You can see here are some notes where I was just messing with some things, just testing different things out. Just a really nice, very clean experience. It's such a shame that it is so locked down. Otherwise, this would be right at the very top of the list instead of in position number 5. Moving on to number 4, we have Markflow, which scored a 10 out of 15. So existing notes access scored a 4. It lets you use iCloud, but it doesn't remember the location. So now we're actually able to use iCloud to access files that are on our computer and also access them on our mobile device. So definitely a step up. One tiny nitpick, it just doesn't remember the location that you used last time. So with some of the desktop apps, you're able to point it at a folder, and then every time you open the app, it remembers that location and then just displays all the files there. Markflow, you have to remind it every single time. It does remember which were the last files you opened, but it doesn't remember which folder they came from. So almost there, just missing that tiny bit of polish. Markdown feel, it scored a 3. It uses 2 modes, definitely a step down from what we saw with Bear, where there's just one single nice kind of hybrid experience. You've got the 2 modes, you have the preview mode, and you have the edit mode. And it offers some basic formatting options, no frills there. Mobile experience was a 3, very clean design, and a quick format keyboard. So just a very nice, standard, clean experience. Nothing too exciting. Let me just jump into the app and show you what it looks like. So here's the Markflow app. As you can see, I've got some test files that I've been looking at. I'm going to just tap on one of these. This is the reading mode. At the very bottom, we have a little pencil icon. That is the edit mode. So if I tap on that, now we're in the Markdown view, where we can just tap on any of these sections and use the keyboard to edit the Markdown. We've got the keyboard right here with the shortcuts for different types of formatting options. Again, this is not editable, but most of the main Markdown options are right here. And then you just tap the little icon to switch over to view mode. So it's pretty quick, nothing too fancy, not nearly as nice, but it's definitely not the worst thing out there. And so the last ones that you've opened show up right here under the recent section. If you click on browse, that's where we're able to view all the options we have available on our device. You can open up iCloud, and that's how you point it to the different files. But like I said, it lets you see the recent files, but you can't see the recent folders, and there's no way to bookmark them. So kind of annoying, but almost there. And then if we take a look at some of the options, we can change the appearance. Not a ton of options, just very basic, simple stuff. So overall, a very nice experience, very clean, very basic. If you want to be able to view nicely formatted Markdown files and do some light editing in an experience where you don't have to pay anything because it uses iCloud to sync, then Markflow is definitely a very decent option. And in spot number 3, we have one Markdown which scored a 10 out of 15. So existing notes access, it scored a 4, works with iCloud, just like the previous one, no problems there. Markdown feel is a 3. There is no live Markdown preview. It uses a split view, which just like the previous app, you switch from edit mode to view mode, go back and forth. It's also more of a Markdown viewer, not so much a standalone Markdown notes app. Even so, the experience is good enough for it to score a 10 out of 15. And it also has a very nice reading mode. Mobile experience, I gave it a 3. It's got the quick format keyboard, which is customizable. You can pick the options you use most, so you're not having to scroll back and forth to find it. And it has a lot of text options, including LaTeX. So that's why this scores a 10 out of 15. So let me show you what the app actually looks like. Here we are in the app, and I'm just going to browse one of these Markdown files that I can use to test. And so here we have the main view. As you can see, this is the Markdown editing view, where we have all the Markdown syntax. At the bottom, we have the different options to view the nicely formatted Markdown. I believe we can actually mark these to-dos, maybe not. Yeah, apparently not. Some of these apps you can actually toggle to-dos. This one apparently you can't, but you still get all the nice Markdown formatting. And then if you click this little half and half kind of icon, you get this split view, or I don't know how I'm going to make this work on the recording, but basically you can have the Markdown view on the left side and then the nicely formatted Markdown on the right-hand side. So very much the way that you would in a desktop app. Not quite sure why you'd want to do that, but you can definitely do it on this app, and you get a bunch of different reading options just if you want to format the Markdown, make it a little bit nicer. But you can also view some stats like the characters on words and jump around to the different sections if it's a particularly long Markdown file. You've got a sharing option, but that's pretty much it. You just open the app, it asks you to pick a folder in a file, and then you tap it and you preview it, edit it, and share it if you want to, and that's pretty much it. Definitely a very lightweight experience, not a lot of options, but if you're just looking for very core functionality of being able to every now and then open up some Markdown files and maybe read them or edit them and then maybe share them, this is definitely going to be more than enough. And it is not such a busy interface. It doesn't throw a bunch of other features at you that if you just want something really basic, this is definitely a good option to go with. Moving on to number 2, we have Joplin, which scored an 11 out of 15. So existing notes access scores a 2. There is no simple way to just point it at a folder on the device as with some of the other options. And there is no iCloud sync. However, I believe it sort of makes up for it by offering a bunch of other options. So it lets you sync through Dropbox, OneDrive, Amazon S3, pretty much everything under the sun other than iCloud. I don't know if they have something against Apple or iCloud, why they didn't include it, because it's probably the most widely used syncing option. But if you do use any other option available out there, you're going to be able to sync your files. And that's why I think it's still worth taking a look at if you're okay with not using iCloud, or if you're already not using iCloud, probably going to be an option in their list that is going to work for you. So no worries, you're going to be able to sync your notes with Joplin. Markdown feel is definitely a 5. It supports live Markdown display and editing, and it's got a really nice reading mode. So just the actual experience of using and editing Markdown on Joplin is really nice. That's why it scores so highly. For mobile experience, I gave it a 4. Like some of these other apps, quick format keyboard, again, is customizable and is completely free. So their sync is paid, but the app is free. There's also a desktop version. But yeah, just the app works very well. It's completely free. Only the syncing is paid, as with some of the apps. But unlike some of the apps where it's free, but the syncing is paid, you can't actually use it unless you pay for the syncing because there's no way to sync the files any other way. Not so with Joplin. You can actually use a bunch of other options. If you just want to support them and give the developer some money, you can go with their syncing option and pay them a little bit of money and then just simplify your life that way. So here's what the Joplin app looks like. I'm just going to tap into one of these notes. So you can see we've got some really nice formatting. And then if we want to actually edit some of these files, at the very top, we've got a little icon that lets us jump into edit mode. And then we can tap on any one of these items. We can see the Markdown formatting, similar to the way we can see it in Bear. Yeah, kind of like a weird combination of you can still see the nice formatting until you tap into it. So I don't know why they've got it as separate modes, but that's just the way they decided to go with it. At the bottom, we have that customizable keyboard for all the shortcuts. All the different formatting options you could want are available there. And then when you're done, you just tap the little icon to go back to reading mode. And that's pretty much it. So if we then go to the syncing options, let me see if these are available. Here we go. It's Joplin Cloud, which is their paid option, or other. And this is what I was talking about. We've got a bunch of different options: Dropbox, OneDrive, Nextcloud, Web, DAV, S3, and their own options. iCloud is obviously a glaring omission here. Like I said, there's probably a reason why they didn't include it, but if you do happen to use any of these other options, then your syncing situation is already sorted. And we've got some more options here. You can change some settings, a bunch of different things. A lot of options here. They seem to support some additional things like probably LaTeX and mermaid diagrams and a bunch of other things in here. So if you're looking for slightly more advanced Markdown options, those seem to be available here. So yeah, just plenty of options that are available. Very simple app. If you can deal with the issue of not being able to use iCloud, then Joplin is another great option to go with. Just some additional features for slightly more advanced Markdown editing. Nothing too crazy, but if you're just looking for a simple way to read your Markdown files, do some light editing, and you happen to use any of the other syncing options that they support, or if you're okay with using their Joplin syncing, then this is definitely one to look at. Just a really nice Markdown writing experience. And in first place, I have Notelane with a 13 out of 15. In terms of existing notes access, I give it a 5. It lets you open a folder in iCloud, and it does the simple syncing that I've been talking about and that we can see in desktop applications, the ones that I recommended previously in the other video. They just do this. I don't know why it's so hard to find an app that does this on iOS, but Notelane definitely does it, and it does it very well. The Markdown feel, I gave it a 4. There is no live Markdown preview, so it uses that same reader and edit mode, but it's still good enough. It's not that big of a deal. I would have preferred that Bear writing and reading experience, but unfortunately, we're just not going to find that in these other apps. Still, the fact that it does let you sync, just opening an iCloud folder, letting you access those same files anywhere on multiple mobile devices and then on the desktop and just kind of syncing across really simply, is why it scores so highly. For mobile experience, I gave it a 4. Very clean design, it's minimal, and it also has that quick format keyboard. It's not customizable like some of the other apps, but doesn't matter, it's still good enough. I think the couple of things Notelane does, it does them really well, especially when it comes to being able to point it at a folder, see the Markdown files, instantly open them, view them, edit them, and then share them if you want to, close it, and then those changes are synced. So just a place to quickly access and edit your Markdown files. That's really all I was looking for. It's ridiculous that there are so many apps out there. This list was so much longer. I looked at so many apps before I settled on just these couple. And honestly, they're okay. Even Notelane is pretty good, but there's not one standout app other than ones like Bear, which unfortunately force you to use their entire system. So you can't combine it with any other note-taking app or even just Markdown files on your computer. You have to buy into their entire plan. So yeah, it's just strange that there are so few really good options. So now let me actually show you what Notelane looks like if you have never seen it before. It's a very nice looking app. Here's what it looks like. So on the very top left hand, we've got the left sidebar, and I've already pointed it to the folder that I want to in my settings. So if I go down here, we have data, storage location. You can connect it to Dropbox. Didn't even notice that. Got just a couple of different settings here for notes, and you can change some of the things around the theme, and that's pretty much it. So once you've pointed it at a folder, these are the files. That's it. That's all I've got in there. I can tap on one of these, and that's it. I've got the formatted view. So that's what it looks like. I can tap into it. And now I've switched over to the Markdown editing view. As you can see, we've got the little dashes there for the bullet points. We've got the hashtags to signify that this is an H2, this is an H1. We have the shortcuts right here above the keyboard. We can't edit it, but it's pretty much all you're going to need for basic things. And that's pretty much it. Once you're done, you tap the little checkbox icon at the very top, and then you go back to the viewing or the reading mode. Let me just check this. There we go. See, this is what I was mentioning before about the app letting you actually interact with some of these things like to-do items. So there we go. And you've got a search. So you can search through the file. That's it. Pretty simple, but it gets the basics exactly the way I would expect. You just point it at a folder. You have access to your Markdown. You have a nice editor. And then that's it. You don't really need much else. So if you're looking for an app that lets you then take the file and then do all kinds of other things like publishing it, sharing it on social media, passing it on to AI, all kinds of other things, there are apps for that. And we saw some of those. But really, if you're looking for just a basic, nice reading and writing experience where you can open up the app and immediately access all the files you have on your computer, make some edits, share, add new files, and then have those sync automatically to your other machines, then you just really can't go wrong with Notelane. It's just a very nicely designed experience, very clean, does exactly what you would expect it to do, and it does it very well. And that is it. If you're looking for an option to handle your Markdown notes, so you sync them across your devices, the ones you've got on your desktop are also available in your pocket on your mobile device. You can't really go wrong with Notelane, Joplin, or One Markdown. And then if you have a specific reason for maybe you've got a slightly more complicated flow and you need those additional connections to other things like publishing platforms or social media, there are some options there. If you're willing to bite the bullet and just give up on all the other note-taking apps because you really like Bear and its experience, then that's available. I wouldn't really go with that option just because I feel it goes against the whole point of using Markdown in the first place, which is it's an open source format. You can open it anywhere. You can access your files across a myriad of applications. And so locking them down into one closed app forever, as nice as the experience might be, just doesn't quite make a lot of sense. Yes, there are ways to import and export things, but it's a very manual process. So honestly, just recommend you stick to some of these other options, which are completely free or offer additional upgrades like letting you opt into their syncing system. But most of these have other ways to sync. So you don't even need to do that if you don't want to. That's why I highly recommend Notelane. One Markdown's a really good one. Even Markflow is honestly pretty good. There's just some visual nitpicks, but depending on how much you're going to be using the mobile app, you can get away with any one of these apps and they'll be a really good experience. So that is it for this video. Be sure to let me know if you thought I completely messed up and I missed your favorite app and there's a better one here. Yeah, like I said, there are a ton of different options. These are not the only ones available. I had to exclude a bunch of other ones for various reasons. But really what I was looking for was just a very simple app that does just a handful of things and it does them really well without locking me into a system or forcing me to upgrade or subscribe to do their syncing. So yeah, that's why this list looks the way it does. And if you are also interested in using Markdown files and folders on your computer for long-term storage or just as a backup for files that maybe you have on the web or somewhere else, and you want to use them on your iOS device, these are definitely the options that I would recommend you take a look at for that. So be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe. So I'll see you in the next one.